Welcome to UCLA Extension Department of Business, Management, and Legal Programs video lecture series on entrepreneurship, new venture formation, and strategic business plan development. The video that you are about to watch is an introduction to the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the strong interest inventory and the role that they play in the strategic planning process, which we also sometimes refer to as the case study planning process or the case study process. I'm Harry Redinger, your instructor. There is a total of over 40 videos in our lecture series that integrates with our UCLA Extension online course management program, Canvas. Each video strives to be brief, but there will be a bit of overlap to tie the curriculum together. Okay, let's get started. Gosh, where to start? I have been a practitioner of the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the strong interest inventory assessments, personality assessments, career planning, career direction assessment for, gosh, over 20 years, 2 decades. UCLA actually played a role in me getting into this because after the first 3 years of teaching entrepreneurship courses 24 years ago at UCLA, I discovered most of my students really didn't understand who they were and where they were going in life, and particularly which was the best alignment for a career. A dear friend of mine who had a doctorate in industrial psychology recommended to me to look into becoming a certified Myers-Briggs type indicator practitioner as well as a strong interest inventory practitioner. And that played a pivotal role in my life because I very much got into both these instruments and embraced them as integral tools in what I do as a corporate trainer. And why I found them to be so essential in planning, in the business planning process, is that when we develop a business plan, the first thing we do, like all of you are going to be doing in this curriculum, is going through the case study process, which leads to the strategic planning process. But it's a formalistic way to make a decision. And the second step in this process is getting all the relevant facts out into the open. And there are three areas that we draw relevant facts from for this process. First is a biography, and we have a whole video on the biography, which you're going to be actually seeing next. But I encourage people to figure out what their Myers-Briggs type indicator is and their career code. What are their most dominant career workplace skills before writing the biography, because it gives you much more insight into where these skills came from. And if there's relevance in the story of your life, knowing this information before you write and develop your biography might help you to have a little more insight in the development of the phases of your life to understand and actually see where these things came from, these skill sets came from, so you can indicate that in your biography, which eventually will become your company history. So, the reasoning that the reasons we're studying these instruments is they assist us in getting relevant facts out on the table for the strategic planning process. Our overall objective is that everything's about alignment, and so our life has some kind of trajectory to it, and understanding and being able to share the story of our life and where our competitive resources have come from, and these competitive resources will be quite evident in the Myers-Briggs type indicator as well as the strong interest inventory, and this information plays into helping helping you see an alignment between where you've been, who you are, and where you're going. And so it gets it out in the mix as we proceed through the strategic planning process. Your strategy must have a sense. Your strategy must have a sense of life destiny, and so you're going to find that as we get into it, that psychological type, the Myers-Briggs, deals with innate personality traits. Same thing with a strong interest inventory. And so things that are innate, we just do, like saying your name with your right hand versus your left hand. You don't even think about it, you just do it. And so as much as we can, we want to align the career or business mission statement that we are going to be developed, our entrepreneurial path into the future, to have as much alignment as we possibly can with what's innate within us. Just dumb logic. And so that's the emphasis of what we're going to be talking about right now. Okay, so the focus of this talk again is going to be on the Myers-Briggs type indicator and the strong interest inventory. Okay, so what is your psychological type? One of my favorite sayings or mantras, if you will, that plays very well into this is what's called the Serenity Prayer. And it says, God, give me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And so things that are innate, the Myers-Briggs type indicator, our psychological type is like our fingerprint. We cannot change it. It's for life. If we try to change our psychological type, it would be like living in hell. So our goal is not to change us, but to understand what we can and cannot change in psychological type is something we cannot change. It's like, again, like our fingerprint. We have to learn to embrace it, to accept ourselves the way we are. And so as we proceed, here we go. I've made a few slides here relevant to that. Psychological type is what we cannot change, and now is a good time to start introducing you to what we refer to as emotional intelligence. So we'll just say your behavior. There's aspects of our personality that we can say is part of psychological type. The other is our behavior. And we can change our behavior with a 90-day personal development program. How we can create new lifestyle habits, new habits. And emotional intelligence is the things that we can change. How we perceive ourselves, how we project ourselves, how we interact with other people, how we make decisions that deal with the emotions of ourselves and others, and how we manage stress. And so those 5 realms are what we call emotional intelligence realms. And the better we do those, the more likely we are to achieve success and be happy in life. So our goal here is to understand the difference between psychological type and emotional intelligence, our behavior. The Myers-Briggs type indicator and the strong interest inventory deal with psychological type issues, things that are innate in who we are. And the better we can understand these, the better and the more we can embrace them, the more that we can integrate this type of knowledge into the strategic planning process, which ultimately is going to identify a career path or an occupational path for us for the rest of our life. So we're going to go through a series of slides now to help you figure out what is your psychological type. So first and foremost, the Myers-Briggs type indicator is a system that has a total of 16 different types, or there's 4 dichotomies, and their dichotomy meaning I prefer this side versus that side. It's better this way versus that way. And so therefore, if there's 4 dichotomies, 4 times 4 is 16, and there are 16 psychological types. 70% of our population fit into these 16 types very well. Each of the dichotomies have what we call subcategories, and sometimes we have out of facet type dichotomy preferences, and but we still will make decisions congruent with what our type is. When we don't fit into this system, our objective is then to narratively describe what is innate and things that we just do and don't even think about doing. And then we put the letters aside and go with some form of narrative statement as to what aspects of us is innate. The Myers-Briggs Type Indicator is a psychological assessment to the aspects of your personality that we cannot change. And so there it deals with innate personality, and there's an exercise that we do with people to help them understand what this is about. So if you could find and take out a piece of paper and a pen or a pencil, and then we want you to sign your name on that piece of paper. You can pause the video right now if you like to find the paper and pencil, and if it's there, just sign your name. And that's what I've done here. I've signed my name, and I'm right-handed, and so there is a right-handed version of my signature. Okay, so when you're done, okay, now I want you to take the pen or pencil with your opposite hand and sign your name. And there we go. And my clicker's off here. There we go. And sign your name with your opposite hand, and you will see that it should probably look different, like maybe you've had a few drinks. But the main question I want to ask you is, how did it feel to sign your name with the opposite hand? The answer we usually get is awkward, uncomfortable. So and the point we're trying to drive here is that it's comfortable to sign your name with your right hand. It's an innate response. You just do it. Well, by the same token, these dichotomies have innate responses too. So these are what we call the 8 preferences, 4 dichotomies, or the 8 preferences. And the first one is introversion. People who like to socialize in small groups would prefer introversion. Next is extroversion, and this would be people who like to socialize in larger groups. The next preference or dichotomy is sensing intuitive, and a sensing person likes to focus on the here and now, the concrete of things they can see and touch, things that our society condone, tradition, culture. And someone who prefers intuition is someone who likes to focus on the future, what's going to happen tomorrow. Looks for the abstract, trusts a guess versus basing their decisions on what's factual. The next dichotomy is our thinking-feeling dichotomy, and people who prefer thinking like to make decisions based on logic. 2 + 2 = 4. Someone who prefers feeling will make decisions based on their emotions, their morals and ethics of their heart. We use both, but sometimes there's a struggle between the two as to which is the right form of energy to base the decision on. But based on these preferences, we have a tendency to lean towards one versus the other in the decision-making process. The next preference is judging versus perceiving. A judging person brings loose ends to a close. They like to make decisions sooner than later. They tend to make lists. They tend to show up to meetings a little early. Whereas a perceiving person is very comfortable with letting things come about, tend to make decisions more towards the last minute, and they're comfortable with that. Whereas if you're a judging person, that would drive you crazy. So this is what we call an attitude in terms of how we like to approach project management or the decision-making process, how we like to manage our life and by getting things done sooner than later, or to put things off to the last minute because that's just the way we are from the standpoint of this preference. So we've shared with you 4 dichotomies, the introversion versus extroversion. And as we start to go through these slides, I want you to take out a piece of paper, because ultimately what we're working towards is to help you come up with a 4-letter identification of your psychological type. So the first dichotomy is introversion versus extroversion, and I'm going to ask you the question, and we're going to go over more slides to help validate this. But you think of yourself as an extrovert or an introvert. If introvert, put an I down. If extrovert, put an E down. The next dichotomy is intuition versus sensing. The intuitive person is peers into the future, thinks in the abstract, feels comfortable with a gut feeling, whereas a sensing person tends to focus on the concrete of the here and now. They want to base their attention on things they can see, knowledge that they have, traditions that they know condone their how they're going to make a decision and where they want to focus their energy. The next dichotomy is, so put an N or an S down, okay? So an N or an S for your second letter. The third letter here is going to be either an F or a T for feeling, a preference for feeling, or a preference for thinking. So if you make decisions with the morals and ethics of your heart, we're looking for an F, and if we make our decisions with the logic of our brain, a T. The next dichotomy is perceiving versus judging, and here we are. If a perceiving person, again, is comfortable with letting things come about, a judging person would much rather get something done sooner than later. So if you're a perceiving person, put a P. If you're a judging person, put a J. So I'm going to share with you some little cartoon skits here that kind of bring this alive, and now we're going to start validating and looking at this information in different ways so that you might want to change it. So first off, we're going to take a look at the extroversion versus introversion. So this little cartoon up here says if you're an extrovert, let's talk it over. Extroverts tend to talk their decisions out loud. And they have a little cartoon here with a guy with a puppet. He's talking to a puppet to make the decision. Versus the introvert person has a little sign out that says, please don't disturb me. Leave me alone. I want to think about this. So an introvert needs to think of things through, often in isolation. One of the ways I figure out people's type without even asking if you're an extrovert or introvert, if you ask an introvert a complex question, they tend to stop and pause. Whereas if you ask a complex question to an extrovert, they go, I'm glad you asked that question. And so they immediately start talking. So someone who's extrovert will start talking out loud to talk through the decision. Someone who's introvert will be like a deer caught in headlights of a Mack truck. And then they'll answer the question. So it's just a little observation, a little trick that I use to find out if someone's preference is extroversion or introversion. The next slide here is sensing versus intuition. Sensing, focus on the concrete of the here and now. Intuition, peering into the future. So a sensing person, and the cartoon has, just the facts, please. Again, a sensing person, just the facts. I want to look at the facts. I'm not looking at morals and ethics. I want to look at, or intuition, peering in the future. I want to look at just the facts. Whereas an intuitive person is, let's look at the opportunities. Let's look at the possibilities of tomorrow. So this, and again, as you validate your selections, which are you? Are you someone who says, please, let's focus on the facts, or let's look at the possibilities of tomorrow? Now, sometimes people answer these questions where I'm both. Well, that can be, and sometimes we have a very slight preference for one side or the other. But what makes the Myers-Briggs type indicator a fascinating instrument is that whether you have a very clear preference for one of the dichotomies or a very slight preference, you still will make decisions congruent with that preference. Okay. Next, we're going to go to our thinking versus feeling dichotomy. And so our little cartoon here has our characters, and the thinking person, they're looking at resumes apparently, and the thinking person says she has good credentials, and the feeling person says, I like her. So, so a feeling person's going to look at how they feel about somebody. The thinking person's, what are the facts? And then finally, judging versus perceiving. And again, the judging person, let's do something. Now let's act in the moment. And perceiving person says, let's wait and see. So the cartoon characters, glad that's finished, because J people are driven to get things done and feel really good when they do get it done. And the P person says, don't worry, we got plenty of time. So again, which is you, judging versus perceiving? So here's a way to validate your type. Now you should have 4 letters, and you can use this as a Myers-Briggs type indicator 16 type grid, and you can look up your type, and there's a little phrase there that you can look up read it, and if that sounds like you, that helps to validate who you are. Otherwise, look around, read around on this grid until you find what you think is most likely you. Know that once you determine your 4-letter type, you can always go to online and just put the 4 letters in and just say, ENFJ profile, ENFJ psychological type profile, and you'll just get oodles and goodles of information on your type. So So this is the first step, is now we want to start validating our type. Now we've got still much more information here that we're going to share with you to help do that. So I'm not going to read all these in detail since we've already kind of gone over it, but this is just some more information. The extrovert people who prefer extroversion tend to focus on the outer world of people and things, whereas introvert people prefer introversion tend to focus on the inner world of ideas and impressions. So this, again, is another way of looking at these two preferences. Next is, sensing intuition. Sensing people tend to focus on the present and concrete information gained from their senses. Intuitive people tend to focus on the future with a view towards patterns and possibilities. And at any time you can stop the video and read these at your own pace. Thinking versus feeling. Thinking tends to base their decisions primarily on logic and objective analysis of cause and effect, whereas a feeling person tends to base their decisions primarily on values and subjective evaluations of people-centered concerns. Next is judging versus perceiving. A judging person tends to prefer a planned and organized approach to life and having things settled. A perceiving person tends to prefer a flexible and spontaneous approach to life and keep their options open. A little thing here, judging people tend not to like to be surprised, whereas perceiving people enjoy being surprised. So another little tidbit there. So again, we want to look at the Myers-Briggs 16 type chart grid, and see if any one of these boxes start to really stand out as you. I also want to emphasize that just because we're helping you identify a specific type, one of these 16 types, this doesn't mean that you're going to make decisions congruent with these all the time. It's just saying that you are most comfortable when you can be in an environment where you can be this type, where things that you do and the way you do what you do are congruent with how one of these types is profiled. All people meet and marry, all people can work in different situations. We're just trying to help you find and be able to identify what makes you tick. So if you can create an optimal work environment for yourself, such as being an entrepreneur and creating your own workplace, this kind of information helps you understand how to develop strategy and infrastructure and things like that that's going to be more aligned, more idealistic with who you are. I want to talk about temperament for a little bit, okay? And so one of the things we do in the classroom is once we've helped everyone identify their type, I'll often ask people who have SP, first SP, sensing, perceiving in their 4 letters, to get up and go to one corner of the room. And then I'll ask people who have SJ, sensing, judging, to go to another corner of the room, and people who have intuitive feeling to go to another corner of the room, and people who have intuitive thinking to go to the other corner of the room. And when I do this, I then will go, in this case, I'll go to the group of people who I've self-selected themselves as sensing, perceiving people, which we refer to as artisans, people who like to do what they like to do when they want to do that. And what their most competitive skill is that of a tacticianer. So I introduce each of the 4 groups to the other groups, and this way everyone gets to start to get to know each other. When we do this in a corporate training environment, what we're doing is helping people accept each other for who they are, to understand the gifts that they bring to the organization. So what an SP group or person brings to the organization, they have an ability to see opportunities when everyone else is blind to it. They are best when it's like lights, camera, action, and it's performance time. These are the things that the artisan does best. Next is the sensing, judging person, and if this group was over here, I would go over them, and they're what we call guardians. They're about 45% of our total population. Let me back up, and the artisans are about 35% of the population. So sensing people make up about 80% of the population, whereas intuitive people make up 20% of the population. So when we introduce the guardians, the animal that represents them is a beaver, because they like to build things for the betterment of all. Their most competitive skill is logistics, getting something from point A to point B. They make sure everyone is taken care of. They make sure everybody's walking out the door with their lunch pail, etc. And I don't know if I mentioned, but for the artisan, the animal that represents the artisan is a fox, because foxes are tacticianers. They bounce around and sticking their nose in holes looking for opportunities. The next over here, we see the intuitive feeling person we call an idealist, and their most competitive skill is statesmanship and diplomacy. They're masters of the human heart. They help people understand why they do what they do. For all of these temperaments, we also find career paths that tend to cluster with each one. So, and by the way, now that you know your 4-letter type, you can always go online and just go, say if you're an ENFJ, go ENFJ careers, and there'll be a website that'll list all the, or a page that'll list all the careers that most ENFJs fall into. The animal that represents an ENFJ is a dolphin, because dolphins like to hunt in family packs. The next, and the NFs always think out of the box. They just don't try to solve the problem. They try to win the Nobel Peace Prize at the same time. And let me back up here. The NFs also are about 15% of our Western culture population. Next is the NTs, and the NTs are what we call the rationalists. They're in love with their brain. They're all about logic, strategy. What they do best is strategy. They're strategic thinking in all that they do. They love solving complex problems. And so there's our introduction to our temperaments. Now we're going to talk a little bit about what we call functional pairs. And functional pairs are the two middle letters. So we have STs, SF, NF, and NT. So they are the vertical columns of the Myers-Briggs type indicator grid. And so the STs, the verticals, we call them the matter of facts people. These are the corporate troopers. These people focus on what needs to get done, and they're on the details, and they're very much focused on getting the job done. They're not too interested in dealing with the emotions of people or people problems. Their objective is get the product manufactured or out the door or the service performed. The next functional pair is what we call SF, the sensing feeling type, and people who fall in this category we call the sympathetic and family types. They're all about family. They're very caring, very understanding, and these people have a big heart. And so the SF people focus on taking care of and nurturing the family, the team, the group within an organization. They're also very good at doing sales and financial investment stuff too. The next group here is the NTs, and the NTs, the intuitive thinking people, are all about strategy. Only 5% of the population are NTs, but 90% of Fortune 500 CEOs are intuitive thinking people. So they're very ingenious. They love solving complex problems, and the animal that represents them, I don't think I mentioned the last time, but that represents them is an owl, because an owl represents wisdom, and owls like to hunt alone. And then next, and last but not least, is the intuitive feeling person, the enthusiastic, insightful types. I've got some slides here that I don't want to drill down, take a lot of time with, but I want you to know they're here, and you can always stop the video to study them. They might help you determine your type, as well as if you know your type or which temperament, in this case, temperament you are, you can go to one of the next 4 slides, and they will give you information that might be useful later on in the case study or strategic planning process. But here we list a number of attributes associated with the guardian, the SJ people. Very structured, believe in regulations, stable, conservative, dependable, etc. Our next is our artisan, the people who want to do what they want to do when they want to do it. And so they're good at just spotting opportunities when everyone else is asleep at the wheel because they're so busy doing what they're doing. So here are some points for the artisan, and then the next is the idealist, the NF people. And so diplomacy, diplomatic, masters is the art of diplomacy. These are our communicators. Many of our book authors and things like that come out of this, because most NF people have very creative minds. And then next is our NTR rationalists, and these are strategic people. Again, they're only 5% of our population. Tough-minded, they're focused on profits, they're focused on getting the job done, but they, most of all, they pride themselves in being very clever and ingenious at what they're doing. Again, here's my favorite slide again. It's all about alignment. So all this information that we just went over regarding the Myers-Briggs type indicator, which focuses on our innate personality, like our fingerprint, the things that we cannot change. Knowing this information can be quite useful in the case study process, which as best as possible looks north, east, south, and west for all the possibilities, and then identifies, shortlists, and identifies the highest and best fit for your future life career as it's being applied in this particular context. And so this, to me, this graph just brings the biography alive and the role that the Myers-Briggs and the Strong Interest Inventory play in the strategic planning process, which we have a whole slide, actually several videos and presentations that deal with just this aspect of entrepreneurship, a business plan development, and new venture formation. Now we're going to get into the strong interest inventory. And the strong interest inventory is an instrument that very much functions like a compass. It kind of gives us an idea of if there's 360 degrees of careers or economies in the professions, industries within the marketplace, it kind of helps us from a compass standpoint narrow it down to 4 or 5 degrees so you get at least pointed in the right direction. And it uses a number of techniques for doing this, but the best way to look at it uses various forms of statistics, multiple regression analysis, as well as specific work traits relevant to, which we're going to share with you in a minute, our skill sets, or the Holland scales, the six work theme scales. And the strong, so the next slides I'm going to share with you, I've broken down into 3 levels of understanding the strong interest inventory. So we're going to go over 3 levels of knowledge, of understanding associated with the strong interest inventory. And the very first is just an introduction. What is it? Of the strong interest inventory. So so from a level 1 standpoint, it assesses your interest, personality, values, and skills. Okay, so it kind of gives an assessment of those things. What are your interests? Next, it deals with learning which career opportunities are the best fit to your personality. So it takes your interests and then and will actually make a short list of what your highest interests, and then it'll take that knowledge and then it'll screen all the known occupations. I think there's some 400 different occupational paths within the strong inventory, and it shortlists that down to the occupational paths that align with your interest. The strong interest inventory measures interests, not ability. If you have an interest, you can develop an ability. Know that if you take the strong interest inventory, there's no wrong answer. All the questions are like on a scale of 1 to 5. Do you agree to? Do you disagree with a particular statement? Level 2 is what we call career theory, okay, and this is just dumb logic, okay, but there's 3 points that we're going to make here. So all individuals have unique characteristics related to their interests, abilities, needs, values, and personality. So I'll read that again. All individuals have unique characteristics related to their interests, abilities, needs, values, and personality. Okay, so let's take that particular statement, that factual statement, and say, now all occupations, jobs have unique characteristics related to work tasks, skills, skill required, demands, and rewards. So if we can say all individuals have unique characteristics and all jobs have basically unique skills and characteristics, now it's just a matter of figuring out the two and putting them together. And that's where we come up with our 3rd point. Workers and employers who are most satisfied when there is when there is as much of a match as possible between the characteristics of the worker and the characteristics of the occupation or job. So again, it's just dumb logic. What are your work skill preferences? What's your interest? And then what occupations have that same interest? And we just try to put the two together. The strong interest inventory does nothing more than that. The third level is the Holland theory of vocational interest, the Holland theory. And this was developed back in, 1910, 1912, because it was most used after World War I, where the GIs were coming back and they needed counseling on what would be the best career path for them. Holland was a Stanford professor, and he is the one who developed what we refer to as the Holland scale. And so here we go. People who can be described as a combination of people can be described as a combination of two more of six types: realistic, investigative, artistic, social, enterprising, conventional. So these are the six scales of the Holland scale, and this particular instrument will rank you in terms of which is your strongest, the strongest, second most strongest, third most strongest, and the three top, the most strongest, dominant of these scales will give you a career code. Job environments that can also be described as as a combination of the same six types. So we can take a look at a job and say, okay, which order of these scales are essential to being good at doing this particular job? And again, it takes these letters and puts them in order. And then again, it's just a matter of just lining things up. People of a given type seek job environments of the same similar type. Duh. But if you don't know to study you or the jobs, you don't think about it. And so sometimes this can give us some insight into occupations and careers that we otherwise might not have any knowledge of because we've never been exposed to it. And that's one of the cool things about the strongest inventory. We might have very, very strong skill sets to do a particular type of occupation, but because of our, the way our life is, we might not even know that occupation exists. So any score, when we get into this later, but the strongest inventory has a point system, and I often refer to them as degrees of correlation. And so when we have degrees of correlation greater than 50, that's notable, that's strong. And if we hit 70 or 80, we're dyed in the wool, that particular profession. If a person can find such a compatible job environment, he or she is likely to be very satisfied and productive. When you stop and think about it, you often have to log in at minimum 2.5 to 3 years in an industry before you really know, is this a fit for me? Anything we do, even with starting a business, it takes a good 2.5 to 3 years to, if you're going to actually succeed. And by the way, a little note here. 80% of businesses, 80 to 90 is very high, fail within the first 2.5 to 3 years. So anything that we can do that helps validate our life force alignment for a business mission statement or a career occupation, all the better, because there's, failure doesn't mean you lose it all. It's sometimes just a stepping stone to figuring out where you're going. And we'll talk, when we get into economics and stuff, about Adam Smith's invisible hand, which kind of guides us through life in terms of leading us to our highest and best fit. But my gosh, if we can take an instrument like this and realize that, we're about to go, bark up the wrong tree, go down the wrong path, and it's quite obvious, this should be a real eye-opener. So it just makes sense. If we can take a little test, an evaluation, and see what it comes up with in terms of where you go, it could literally save 3, 4, 5, 10 years of your life at something that you just really shouldn't have been messing around with anyway. Let's take a look at the hexagon of the general occupational themes. General occupational themes is another way of saying the strong interest inventory. So the first is in investigative, and investigative is skills that deal with research, computers, analysis, scientific inquiry, and things of that sort. People who have a strong preference and interest in being realistic, these are the hands-on type things, the problem solving, building, being practical, making things. The next scale is the theme is the conventional, and conventional people prefer very structured, organized environments, doing accounting, bookkeeping, numbers, dates, kind of stuff. Enterprising people or business people, public speaking type people, politics type people, decision-making type people, people who enjoy engaging firsthand, making things happen type people. Social kind of speaks for itself, but people, caring for others, communication, helping, teaching, teamwork. Preferences. And then artistic is people who like to be creative, who like to come up with original solutions to problems, think out of the box. And by the way, a number of these scales have correlation to the Myers-Briggs type indicator. So we often see correlations between one's psychological type and their strongest inventory report results. Realistic people are motivated by building, repairing, being outdoors. People who have a preference for being realistic, our best skills are making, repairing things, problem solving with tools, machinery, mechanical ingenuity and dexterity, physical coordination, and handling emergencies and things of that sort. The investigative type people are motivated by analyzing, inquiring, and researching. Some of their best people who prefer investigative best skills are scientific, investigating, research, analyzing, writing technical documents, performing mathematical type problems and routines. People have a preference for artistic, are motivated by creative insight, expressing individually, self-expression through art, music, writing, and cooking. People who have a preference for artistic, their skills are best. Their best skills are creativity, imagination, verbal, linguistic, music, and dramatics. And people who have a preference for social are motivated by helping others, empowering others, instructing, and nurturing. People have a preference for social, also have best skills are developing relationships, verbal communications, teaching, listening, understanding others. And I think last but not least is enterprising, motivated by persuading, selling, and leading. Someone who prefers enterprising or their best skills are public speaking, persuading, selling, social, interpersonal interactions, leading, focusing on organizational goals. Oh, excuse me. Okay, this is last. And then conventional people have a preference for conventional skills are motivated by organization, processing, data, managing information. People who prefer conventional, their best skills are organizational, efficiency, patience, persistent, management, systems, data, mathematics, and operating computers. So here's some, if you actually take the strong inventory, I just want to give you some tips on it. For both the Myers-Briggs and the strongest inventory, you always kind of want to have a shoes-off kind of mindset. And not to be thinking of, whether I'm at home or at work, just being true to who you are. You want to answer these questions not from the standpoint, am I at work or at home? Just, answer them and being just true to who you are, and usually the best answer is the first one. But with the strong interest inventory, and that's what SII stands for, strong interest inventory. There are no right or wrong answers. There's a total of 291 questions. So your first response is the best, but if one didn't quite work out, don't worry, it's not going to affect the overall report that much. No one answer will affect your results, so try to give the first answer that comes to mind. Next is remember your answers should be based on whether you have an interest in something, not if you have an ability. So just go by on interest, but not because you might you might not have any experience at all driving a 16-wheeler truck. And I believe one of the questions is, what, on a scale of 1 to 5, what do you think about driving a 16-wheeler truck across the country? Now, do I personally want to be a truck driver for the rest of my life? No. But if someone offered me, would you like to do it once, to drive it, from one coast to the other, I'd probably, if I had the time, I'd probably do it just for the experience of it. But I wouldn't want to live a life as a truck driver, so I might give on an interest of 1 to 5, maybe a 2, but no more than that. Don't let cost or salary be a factor in your answer. If you have an interest, then put it down, but don't adjust it. If the interest's high, but don't adjust it down because you think, well, people who do this don't make much money. If you're really passionate about something, sometimes the money follows you. So kind of always bear that in mind. And then finally, allow about 30 to 45 minutes to complete the assessment. That's my experience. That's pretty fair amount of time. Once you've come up with either a report, or if you self-select what you think your 3 career letters are, there's a government website called onetonline.org. What an amazing resource. If you go to that website and just put the 3 letters that you feel are your occupational theme code letters, all the jobs that align with just come up, and it gives, current hiring demand, salaries, hourly wages, academic requirements, skill set requirements, and things like that. So, and whether you're it's a business or a career, this is a fabulous resource to figure out career path, business path, and always remember, whether it's a job or an entrepreneurial venture, you still have to be passionate about what you do, and as an occupation. And so the onetonline.org website can really help you, pin that stuff down. Here's just a quick example of what the strong inventory theme code. So it's going to list the 6 categories and indicate is it high, really high, medium, or low. By the way, that's my actual strong interest inventory score. So my highest is artistic, enterprising, and realistic. So I was, and then also sociable. Social. So I actually have high for the top 4. Their system only works with the top 3 letters, but you can take any combination of these letters to query the career paths on the ONET Online website. And then the top 10 occupations here, corporate trainer, and interestingly enough, that's what I do. Organizational management, a top executive, parks and recreation. I've always been an outdoorsy type person. So anyway, it lists the career paths. Why this information is really super important is when you do your strategic planning process, you're going to shortlist all the job functions, career solutions, opportunities, strategies, and then work to shortlist them, and then do a SWOT analysis, and then make a decision. So the strong interest inventory gets out on the table ideas in terms of maybe not so much what type of business, but the role that you would play as an entrepreneur within the business you start. It helps you identify your most competitive resources. And then there's another report that comes with the Strong Summary called the Strong Basic Interest Scale. And for each of the 6 Holland Scale work themes, it will list 4 or 5 of actual interest categories underneath that, and a number scale associated to how well you did with them. So even if you had scales, like in my case, social, investigative, conventional were lower, but still I had some items in here that scored way over 50 points that might in some way play a role in how I would craft a strategy in terms of aligning my skills up with opportunities in the future. Know that PDF copies of these reports are available at the producer of these, which is called CPP or cpp.com, or if you just Google example strong interest inventory reports, you'll find plenty of them on the internet. So at this particular point, we just want to kind of summarize that the whole objective here, and the next video you're going to watch is going to be on how to write a biography. But so now we can take the biography, the strongest inventory, and the Myers-Briggs type indicator that'll feed into the strategic planning process, which is another video. And then from there, we're going to come up with our mission statement, our vision of success statement, our organizational structure, and our phase of competitive development. One of the things I want to share with you too that comes from understanding this information and using this information in corporate environments. We can use this information to help people understand what it's like to be ourselves in a workplace. We're all different, and these types of instruments help people understand what makes us different, and then to appreciate, not get frustrated by people's differences, but to appreciate that their differences actually are relevant to skills that they're good at that you probably aren't so good at. And an organization needs all 4 temperaments. It needs all the skills and gifts that each type bring to it to be the best that they can be in the workplace. I also want to wrap things up here by saying life is all about making the right decisions, and the right decisions tend to align with your psychological type innate preferences. So whenever you can make a decision that aligns with things that you're just naturally more competitive about, you just do it. You don't even think about it. You're going to find that to be more often than not the highest and best fit solution for whatever you're confronted with. And as a final summary of this whole video, remember that psychological type is the aspect of our personality that we cannot change. It's like our fingerprint. So the better we understand our workplace skills, interests, as well as our Myers-Briggs preferences, and making decisions that are congruent with these innate aspects of our personality, we're just going to be happier campers as we go through life and as we engage the occupations that we select as a career or as a business. I thank you much. Sorry that ran a little bit longer than I anticipated. The next video up is the video on how to write a biography. See you there.